How are we doing, everybody? Welcome back into debate night. We are back yet again with some great guests, some great topics as well. Looking forward to it. The man of the people is back with us. Brodie, how are we doing?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting episode. I usually, try to prep a little bit for the episodes. Things just were not in my favor this week, so we're going off the cuff, which, could be good, could be bad, depends. You guys let me know in the comments. But man, the people back. Top comment from last week. Hunter said, old Rick never misses that putt. Brodie says, only a Sith deals in absolutes. I don't remember saying that, but that was the top comment. Also, second top comment was $30 for a Frisbee. That's half a brisket right there. I will say I am all in now on buying meat from a rancher.
Yes.
I've been doing it for the last week and a half, and it's been exquisite. It's incredible. Meat is also apparently not supposed to be red. Didn't know that.
It's part of the processing, right?
That's why you cook it first. Yeah, it's usually not supposed to be red.
Yeah, if you eat it while it's red, you got a problem.
No. I'm saying I was saying the meat in the store.
It's not supposed to be that red.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not supposed to, I always thought ground beef was like bright red. Apparently, no, it's not. They changed that color to make you feel more comfortable, I guess. I don't know.
Big cow wants you to think that.
Red dye number 5.
Here's a guy that can't eat cow, Hunter.
Can't eat cow, but we do buy our chicken from Maranatha Farms.
Locally. Shout out.
Name drop.
Yeah,
Shout
name drop.
out.
They're right up the road. Really nice people. Husband's a neurosurgeon, so they just do it for fun.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Gary, hot seat. Where do you get your poultry?
We believe it or not have a thing with my parents where we like split a cow and stuff, and we get,
Everybody here's got something going on.
We get really good like hot Italian sausage that way too. It's really good.
Moses, are you and I like the only ones that don't do any of that?
I'm a vegetarian. I'm out on this one.
There you go.
Don't have a meat dealer. What can I say?
Dude, all right. Well,
That's just Trev.
I guess it's just me then. I got to
pretty
get a bigger
impressive.
freezer
This many
first.
episodes to tell us you're vegetarian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We just outed Moses right here on the episode. Comment down below your favorite vegetarian recipe.
Yeah, how is it that didn't come out in these episodes? I have no idea.
Yeah, how did we never get to that topic? All right, well, let's just jump into things here. Start talking about Gannon Buhr, man of the hour. So, with a historic performance at the Preserve, has Gannon Buhr yet convinced you that he may be able to match or exceed his win total from 2024? His pace does seem quite similar. We obviously talked about this a bit at the beginning of the year, kind of before the season got going, but now things look a little different. So, Brodie, what do you think about this one?
I think, folks, we are close to the first time ever seeing Gannon-proof courses. I think we're going to have to start seeing them because the way he's going about it at some of these events, if he's playing well, I mean, he's just going to destroy the field. And the one thing, and this is coming from Gannon's mouth himself, that he has said that he doesn't want to see is he doesn't want to see decision making. He doesn't want to have to decide, should I lay up? Should I try to land to the right side of the fairway? Should I try to go left side of the fairway? Should I try to go through this gap? He doesn't want to do that. He wants straightforward disc golf. So we might see maybe a couple years from now, who knows, Gannon-proofed courses, because the way that he played this weekend, I mean, there was just no doubt that he was going to win the event. And obviously, we love watching perfection. We love watching players like Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, Steph Curry for a moment there, Lance Armstrong before the drug allegations, Usain Bolt. We love seeing greatness and people go for crazy stuff, but we also want to see them have to take down people. And he just smoked everyone. I mean, we were making jokes of, is he going to lay up 10 times leading into that final putt, because that's how much he could have done and still won the event. So I think he's on pace. He looks great. And right now he's proven with the courses that disc golf currently are putting in front of him, if he plays good, no one else is beating him.
Okay. Yeah, it's certainly been convincing. Hunter, where do you stand on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually remember where I stood at the beginning of the year, but at this point in the year, I mean, it's not like 100% certain he's going to reach 9 again, because that's still a crazy win total. but the dude's gonna get 6 or 7. Like I don't. The problem is, to Brodie's point, if he's playing good, not even great, he's kind of where Paul was at one point in his career, where if Gannon goes out and has a good weekend on a course that matches his game, I don't know if there's someone that can beat him. To be honest with you, I don't know if some players in the field's great is as good as Gannon Buhr's good. Because you watched this weekend, and it's not just this weekend. We've seen it also on other places where it doesn't even look like Gannon has to try hard. And I saw some people were complimenting that the way Gannon builds his bag, they think might attribute to his success, because he kind of goes, what's funny is they were saying the old school mentality is against this, but it's actually, he goes the old school mentality where he has a simple bag, he throws a few molds, and he adjusts his release angle with those comfortable molds. I don't know how much that plays into it versus, you know, other guys bagging 25 different molds. I don't think that has nearly as much factor as how good he is, but there's something going on for sure. But I think at the end of the day, I can confidently say now, I think Gannon Buhr is the greatest player we've ever seen. I think what he does with a disc is something we've never seen before at a level we've never seen before. He just doesn't quite have the accolades. So I think for Gannon, though, instead of focusing on matching last year's win total, all eyes have to be on Worlds, because he's got to start winning some Worlds while he's this dominant.
Yeah, certainly a big one. If I remember correctly, I think not just you, but everybody was against the idea that he would match or exceed the win total.
I didn't think it'd be possible.
It didn't really seem like something that was likely.
He was at 3 at this point last year, and here we are. He's got 3 again.
Yeah, Gary, are you in the same boat?
When you look at the numbers, it seems very, very clear to me that Gannon is going to be able to do it. I really don't think I had to be convinced that it was going to be possible, because Gannon outright said himself on an interview this year that he thinks he could eclipse that number. And if you look at the years, by this same point last year, like Hunter said, his average finish was 4.8 last year with 3 wins, and his average finish this year is 3.8 with 3 wins. And, you know, it's 3 less events, so smaller sample size. But other things, like he finished outside the top 5 a total of 4 times by now last year. It's only happened once this year so far, and he now has 3 wins in the last 5 events. So something is happening. He's clearly clicking and running on all cylinders. And he mentioned on an interview that he was feeling like his putting was what was holding him back to start the season off. So he's been doing several hundred putts a day to deal with that. And we can see the evidence of that happening, because if you look at, I compared all the stats prior to his first win and all the stats since that first win, his fairways hit in C2 and regulation have been exactly the same in terms of percentage. His scramble, C1 in regulation, and C1X have improved by 1%. But here's where the practice he's doing has come in. Before his first win, his C2 putting was 24%. Now it's 37% after that win. In his wins alone, his C1X has been 94% and his C2 has been 41%. So that means you have, like everything we've said so far, you have Gannon, who is a top tier, the best our sport has, able to in season evaluate his own game and make legitimate improvements. With the level of play in the last 5 events, I definitely think he's going to be eclipsing or matching 2024.
Yeah, certainly looks like it could be that way. Moses, do you think anything could stand in his way and slow him down?
I honestly don't think so. I will come out and say, like, I am through and through a Paul fanboy, always have been. So, like, I am one of those guys that I didn't want Gannon to be that great, because I wanted, like, Paul's, you know, legacy to stand out there. And I got to say, he is as good as everyone has said he is, if not better. I agree with Hunter, where this is the best disc golf I've ever seen played, the most consistent disc golf I've ever seen played. Even like they said before, if you look at it at an event basis, he is 2 wins ahead of where he was last year. If you're just looking at the number of events, not what actual event we're at, and his average finish place is lower. So he's arguably having a better season at this point than he did last year. And what's scary is that he didn't start the season putting well. And he still is at this point and able to make those changes in his game, which is absolutely crazy. To me, his throwing is so consistent that it almost like wasn't a huge deal. Obviously, the putting improvement has helped quite a bit, but I think of him as Mr. Consistent. I think he's kind of dethroned Calvin in that way, but at the widest of margins. You know, when I watch Gannon, there's no doubt in my mind that he's going to release the disc on the exact angle that he wants at the exact speed with the correct disc. He's a robotic player, kind of in the way that we used to think of European players, honestly. I think he's going to continue to win this season, equaling, if not passing, his 2024 performance. But I do agree with Hunter. His focus has to be the World Championships. He said it many times. He doesn't, necessarily care that much about the smaller tournaments. I think he has to go out and win Worlds this year.
Yeah, certainly. I think the majors, it's crazy to think a player as young as him is already kind of turning his focus towards the majors, and really that's really what he has left to do. But
I have a question for you guys. Do any of you guys have any idea why this tournament produced a leaderboard of, normally you see a handful of people, maybe one, maybe two names that you don't normally see in the top 20, but this leaderboard produced, Corey Ellis. We haven't really been seeing him too much. He got second.
He's been getting hot though.
Carter Airhearns, this guy's like missed cuts. Has I think he got last place at an event too this year. He pops off and gets third. Silas Schultz, we haven't talked much about him since his Champions Cup run back in the day. He was kind of up there in fifth. Noah Meitzma in sixth. Then you have Robert Burridge. We haven't talked much about him this season. He got 10th. Mason Ford, another name we haven't talked about much. He got 12th. Peter Calabrese, I don't know who that is. Sorry, no disrespect, but great tournament for him. He got 15th. Lucas Carmichael got 17th. Any idea why?
Well, those names you just mentioned have a lot of them have a pretty common theme. You talk about Silas Schultz, Lucas Carmichael, Carter Ahrens. Those are guys with big arms that I think it just shows you the preserve has a little bit of extra margin for error.
Just
and
chuck
when you have
it
guys
wherever.
you got guys who can rip it, and maybe putting wasn't a huge factor either because they're not amazing putters of the disc. So I think that just shows you that they were chucking it.
I think historically, like Waco's always been one that's wacko, right? Like that's always been like Waco's thing. And Preserve, I think, has that similar vibe where it creates these weird leaderboards that typically are all jumbled up going into the final round. Like someone outside the top 10 might have a shot at winning it. The only thing that made that not be true this year was Gannon's pace. But I think that what it is it's just scoreable for the whole field. It's not asking, like it's a demanding course in some ways, but it's just asking you to throw to like really giant landing zones. A lot of times there is that large margin for error. There is OB, but there's not at the level you might see elsewhere with more open courses. So it allows you, similar to how Waco is, where Waco is just scoreable for the whole field. Like I could go out and get a decent bit of
play good if they play well.
Exactly. I think it just kind of
also
brings everyone in. But then we saw the downside of that is like the best players in the world are still the best players in the world. So you're just giving someone the opportunity to, like, 18 under was out there for Gannon. I mean, the dude shot 16 with a bogey. Like like the 18 under was out there for Gannon and really a few other players. It's just Gannon's had a good weekend and he's that consistent that like 16-15 was just, he walked everyone in.
Yeah, there's a few players missing from that field that maybe would have drove a couple more guys out, Ezra Robinson, Paul, to name a couple, but
Isaac, Niklas.
There's quite a few that would have drove more people out of that top.
Maybe that's what it was. We kind of were missing some of the top guys.
But of those names you mentioned, like those are players that aren't usually even sitting on the outside of the top 10, like Carter Ahrens and the Lucas Carmichael, like that. Those are definitely more of anomalies. So I think it just shows you that course is, like you said, it can be scoreable for everybody.
Yeah, so I think Carter's best finish this season prior to this was
not good.
32nd at Cascade Challenge.
He hasn't super panned out.
So he just signed a
college deal. He's going to go win heck of national championships, though.
EMAC was speaking some truth to him, and
maybe that's all he needed.
He's got the momentum going.
We even saw Presnell on camera a few times there having some decent rounds. So yeah, you're right. We definitely
easy on the Presnell slander though. He's like a top 25 player.
No. What I'm saying was when you see players like those other guys, like it was impressive to see him with not as much of a long distance arm talent. Being on the scene 2 days in a row on coverage. I was really pumped to see that. I'm
curious what it would have been if the course would have played out the way Simon wanted it, where no OB basically anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Gannon might have got 18.
Would have been Shred City.
I don't have stats to back that up. I'm just saying.
All right, well, let's talk about another player that had a lot of success out there, and that's Silva Saarinen. Definitely on a bit of a hot streak right now. So I want to know, is Silva Saarinen the best candidate yet to be the Kristen Slayer? Definitely every time a player kind of makes their way up the FPO charts, we talk about, okay, is this the one that's going to take things over, beat Kristen consistently? We've seen my other players have a certain runs of success, but obviously Kristen's been very good this year as well. So I want to know, is she the best candidate yet? And what has been the key to her quick rise on tour in the last year and a half or so? Hunter, what do you think?
I think she probably is. Mainly, if you're looking at the major stats categories for this year, there's only two players that are in the top 10 in all of them, and that is Silva Saarinen and Kristen Lott. And where Silva gains her edge is on the putting green. If you look at it, she's second in Circle 1X putting. She's also second in Circle 2 putting. Kristen is sixth in both. When we look at players who Kristen's went toe-to-toe with before, Holland Hanley, 12th in C1X, 8th in C2. Evelina, 40th in C1X, 20th in C2. Missy, 10th and 4th in those stats. So all of those players, I think the Circle 1 putting is where Silva shines, because what it allows her to do is we've seen players multiple times be able to get themselves in position, and then Kristen hit a big putt, and that little slip in stats cause a missed putt that then leads to another missed putt that leads to a bogey when it could have been a birdie, or cause a missed putt that allows them to lose a stroke to Kristen, or they miss a putt and leave a door open. We've seen it. I think a lot of cracks start on the putting green and then spill into the fairway, versus Silva is just ice cold. Like, there was so many opportunities where she missed her birdie putt, and it's like, here we go. This could be where Kristen takes two, and then she makes a long par putt. She has a 42-footer for birdie. Kristen's just inside of her. Like, here we go. This is where she's gonna miss it. This is gonna be the strokes, and then she cashes it. She's just cool, calm, and collected. Her only thing against her is she can't throw the disc far. So there's just some courses where that alone is gonna keep her back and make it harder. But when you just go skill for skill, I think that she's very comparable to Kristen.
Okay, Gary, our European correspondent, not convinced, perhaps.
Yeah, they met 8 times this year so far, and Kristen has won 6 of those times. And in the 2 times that they met, that Silva's won, it's only been by a combined 3 strokes. I think Silva's in this conversation from like more of a recency thing, and I'm not downplaying her overall potential, but we can hardly say that 2 wins is enough to be a slayer of Kristen. Also, if she takes down a major or 2 in the upcoming major sprint, we can have a conversation then. But I think that her quick rise can be attributed to a definite skill that she has, a lot of the stats that Hunter had mentioned in his thing as well. And she made some very clutch putts down the stretch against Kristen, but we're also missing other members of the Euro squad. Like, where has Evelina been all this time? If she was in the field, would Silva be as dominant? That's a good question to ask. I'm just not fully convinced that Silva is the next big thing yet, because we've seen other players come to the forefront for a year or two and then kind of fall away. And I think she lacks a serviceable forehand. She tends to crack down the stretch at times. She's had moments where she's just yanked it into the woods on a late, drive. And it also feels like she lacks confidence in herself. In her post-round interview, she said that she didn't know that she could play that good. That doesn't sound like a slayer to me. It sounds like someone who's trying to find their game a little bit, and maybe that will change with her first win on the U.S. soil. So I try to look and see any other player that could fill the role of a Kristen slayer, and it wasn't Holland, Missy, or Silva, but I did find one who beats Kristen more than any other, and her name is Kristen. Kristen has the highest ceiling of any FPO player, and when she plays well, she wins. But when she makes unnecessary mistakes and someone else plays bonkers, she loses. No one forced her to throw OB on hole 10 and shank her second shot. No one forced her to miss a 25-foot birdie putt on hole 11 or a poor drive on 14 and 15. Only Kristen and her broken pinky toe can outplay Kristen at this point, and 2 wins a slayer does not make.
Okay.
Question said best candidate, not is Silva. Something to think about there.
It's true. It is a good point.
Say, is she the Kristen Slayer? Is she the best candidate? And I think
Gary's
we all
passionate about it, man.
The best candidate's Kristen.
I don't mind that take. Moses is the only one that can beat Kristen consistently herself.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think we do this in all of sports. It's when you have the greatest of all time, or even someone that's just playing really well, we look for the next best. We look for the next up to try and beat them. And frankly, I don't see Silva as a dominant FPO player in the same way Kristen has. I mean, we're arguably seeing the greatest of all time. I think Silva's going to slot into that top 5 FPO group the same way that Holland, Missy, and especially the way that Owen used to be. I think that's my comp for Silva, is a younger, backhand dominant Owen Scoggins with a higher ceiling for quite a few reasons. I think the number one, the standout feature is obviously putting, 88% from C1 at the preserve, which is fantastic, but it really is that lack of distance that holds her back in a way that kind of Owen was as well. And I think the reason she's risen so quickly is because of that consistency. She does almost everything well. And I think one thing to kind of bring up, Gary, you mentioned, is like the mental strength that she has. And I know, in a lot of ways we would say, oh, well, her saying she didn't know she could play that one and everything. She doesn't speak English that great. Like, I don't think that she is articulating really what she means in the ways that she's thinking it, at least. And so I think like the mental toughness that she has is more out there than what we're actually seeing. I think she's going to continue to get around 4 wins per season, but I don't think she's going to be on Kristen's level. I don't think she's going to dominate the FPO field for a majority of events. I don't think that there's a consistent FPO player to beat Kristen at this point. I do want to shout out Valerie Mandujano, 12 down final round. That was incredible. Kind of a similar player, used to be at least. But yeah, shout out to her.
True. There was a time maybe looked at Val that way. Maybe she's the next Kristen Slayer. Brodie, wrap it up for us. What do you think about Silva's potential to beat Kristen consistently?
All right. I'll start by this, because I think maybe people are watching highlights, or maybe people are listening to what other people have to say that maybe don't know about FPO, and so they just think it's fact and they just say it. I think that's what's happening right now on this podcast, because there's a couple things. First and foremost, she can throw far. This idea that Silva can't throw far, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Own can throw like 100 feet shorter than her. Like, it's not even close. Silva multiple times was the farthest thrower with Kristen on the card. Was the farthest thrower on the card multiple times. She was the farthest down the fairway. Yeah, does she throw as far as Evelina or Henna or maybe like Ella or Holland? Probably not, but sometimes she outthrows those players as well, because if she hits her angle right, it will go farther. I'll put this to the test too. Give me Hunter, give me Silva, one throw. Let's see who throws farther. Let's just see. So that's the first thing. She does throw far. Also, there was some comparisons to some other players. Here's the thing, guys. Go back to years ago, and I told you, I saw this person on the putting green. She does not putt like a normal FPO player that we have seen in the past. Her putt is different. It's almost kind of like Haley King. I think that's a good comp. Back when Haley King was just cashing putts all over the place and making it look very easy, that is Silva. Silva would have beaten Kristen also multiple times this year had she not crumbled. That is her biggest thing right now, is her pressure. And we have all been there. When you step onto a tee pad and try to throw a shot, it is different than trying to make a putt. A putt is slow. A putt, you have to eventually say, do it. Where when you're throwing a shot, you start a run up. You start movement. Putting, you're just here and you're nervous to start the downwards to go upwards. Silva, that has been her problem. She's proven it the last two tournaments. It's not a problem right now. Will it be a problem in the future? I don't know. But as of right now, she is the best candidate. She went back-to-back against Kristen, and she would have beaten Kristen a couple times this season already had she not fallen off. The only thing I have against Silva, get off your phone. I mean, every time it cuts to her and she's not throwing a disc, she's on her phone. I don't know what she's looking at. The scoreboard can't be changing that often. We got to get her off their phone.
To Moses' point, maybe she's trying to figure out what people are saying about her.
She's a constant translation up.
Yes, Hunter.
I have a rebuttal. Well, I've seen it in person, and I will say Silva's disc might go farther, but that doesn't mean she throws as far, because she might have to shape a shot more than someone who can just throw a hyzer.
Do the laws of physics cease to exist on your stove?
Can we get a quote, Corey?
Wait, can someone quote that, please?
I'm saying, if I step up, like if Brodie and I step up to a hole and I throw a hyzer flip full flex shot that gets me out in the middle of the fairway, and Brodie throws a chip hyzer and my disc out drives him, that doesn't mean I throw farther.
Means you
on
threw
that hole
further.
you did.
On that hole I did, sure. But I'm saying
it doesn't mean you have a stronger arm.
Exactly. So Silva's going to have to shape a shot more, which leads to potentially more danger. So as the courses get longer, the players who can actually throw farther have an advantage, because they can be throwing a hyzer flip to flat that hyzers out, where she has to throw a full shot to get to the same landing zone. So it's like these other players might be able to go and eclipse her by 50 to 100 feet and choose not to, versus she doesn't have that luxury. She's having to max out.
If somehow the FPO had to play a demanding course, she would be in trouble for distance.
I'm saying when the courses get longer. We've seen it before. There's just certain courses where I don't think she's going to be as much of a threat. But back to Gary's point, where he was saying Kristen takes herself out of it, what I was witnessing was Kristen doing what Kristen typically does and pushing, yet the other player refusing to budge. And I don't know how much that affects what happens to Kristen. Because like sometimes Kristen would be stepping up to a putt and the player wouldn't have just cashed a 42-footer in her face. Or she would have made a putt and the player wouldn't have immediately made it after her. So there's also a little bit to that, to where Kristen's used to, I do this, the other player crumbles. And she does that, the other player stands strong. Who knows how much that's playing into, I have to chase this person more than I can just play my game and it's going to come to me. Which, as much as people want to say that's not what happens in FPO, that's what happens in FPO a lot of times. Is Kristen just does what she does, and then next thing you know, Ella Hansen collapses at Waco, or Missy throws OB, or Holland misses an important putt, or whatever happens. Versus this time, what I saw in the last two tournaments is, I've said it, Silva out-Kristened Kristen, where I felt like Kristen was trying to be Mrs. Consistent and was just met with an equally as consistent force and didn't know what to do. That's what it felt like to me watching.
That's tough for me though, because if Kristen is the best we've ever seen from like an FPO player perspective, she had the big birdie on hole 9, and so she takes the box on hole 10 and she just throws it out of bounds. I mean, I'm not saying
weird shots.
Yeah,
but after hole 10, she then goes birdie and starts charging Silva, which typically.
On 11, she misses a 25-foot putt for birdie, and she had the
maybe
chance.
It's 12 and 13. When does she go back-to-back birdies to Silva's pars?
It's
from 4 to 2.
It's 12 and 13.
So 12 and 13, she takes those. One of the two, Silva airballs the putt and has a comeback putt. That's something that in FPO is typically missed. So now all of a sudden it's typically one. And then they both birdie. I believe it's 14 or 15. And that's where Silva steps up and cashes like a 45-footer in her face. That's another thing that historically doesn't happen. So usually in that scenario, Kristen's now tied. Instead, she's back 2. And like, that's something where I think Kristen never isn't used to seeing that. Kristen's used to, I do this, I push, I charge, I have the lead. Instead, she push, she charge, I have 2 strokes to still make up. I think that's where it just gets a little weird. And I'm wondering how much that might be affecting Kristen.
Maybe. I mean, I feel like the last 2 events, I feel like Kristen could have won them. Like to Brodie's point, to Brodie's point, where Silva could have won previous events against Kristen. Kristen, I think, definitely could have won both of these events. Maybe a little less this one, but honestly, it felt like Ale was in Kristen's hands, and then she three-putted.
And we can't take the credit fully out of Silva's hands by saying that she didn't have anything to do with what we saw going on between Kristen's ears.
And that's kind of FPO golf too. FPO golf has always been like a little more mistake ridden down the stretch, especially like sometimes you get MPO events where guys just turn into robots and it's really just, who makes the most birdies.
They run out of holes a lot.
Right. They run out of holes where it's like FPO, there is going to be some situations where people throw themselves out of it and some where people take stroke. Like it's a little more give and take there. But let's talk about somebody once again. Let's go back to Gannon and talk about somebody who was not giving up any leeway. I want to know. So the way Gannon ran away from the field this past weekend has seldom been seen in the recent era of MPO disc golf. Do you think that any other player in the field right now is capable of such a runaway victory on tour? And do you think this result would have been any different if more of the top players were in attendance at this event? Because I'm not sure at this point. I mean, the way you guys were talking about Gannon before, it seems like maybe nobody else is capable of something like this. Gary, what do you think?
I'll address the second question first. Yeah, that we were missing Isaac Robinson, Ezra Robinson, Nicholas, and Paul Macbeth. I think the presence of any one of them would have done nothing to stop Gannon from this, because Isaac only wins majors. Paul would have choked in one of the rounds, and Nicholas and Ezra would have been competing with Corey Ellis for second place. But now that I got that out of the way, I think you need 2 things to be able to win in the fashion that we saw this weekend from Gannon. First, you have to have the spicy gene, which is you have to get hot and know how to stay hot. And then secondly, you have to be able to sustain that from day to day. So you have to be able to go to bed at night, wake up and do the same thing again. And there are numerous players who meet the first criteria. Paul and Ricky have been doing that for years. Calvin does it at least once a tournament. AB can light it up. Isaac sniffs a major and goes lights out. And then Simon just goes unconscious from time to time. But the second criteria is where a lot of those guys typically tend to fall short. And in all honesty, taking the current year in performance into account, I think there's only one player that could do something like that. And that's maybe AB. I think he's the only one that has the skill set of power, backhand, forehand, the necessary C1X putting and C2 putting to be able to put a streak of a tournament together like that. I could see an argument to be made that Ricky could do that, but we're just not seeing that out of him this year. So I'm going to say that AB is the only person that I feel like could put an entire tournament together and outpace the field pretty well. But guess what? If Gannon plays to his potential, that's never going to happen because no one's going to touch him.
It's true. It's true. To do that, you have to be ahead of Gannon. Maybe he just needs to not be there. Moses, do you think anybody can do it like Gannon can?
I mean, this is just like the Gannon glazing podcast at this point, because there's not much else to say, to be fair. Like, out of the top 20 in the Pro Tour standings, Paul, Isaac, Nicholas, Ezra Robinson, and Vino were the only ones that weren't there. And not a single one of those players was going to compete with Gannon this past weekend. By ratings, Gannon had the greatest of all time tournament. Like, that's insane. I think he averaged 1088 for the tournament. And a lot of players are capable, like Gary was saying, of shooting one-off rounds or for a tournament. We've seen 1,100 rated rounds. Ricky shot an 1117 at the European Disc Golf Festival last year. He won the tournament by 1 stroke over Paul. It wasn't a consistent performance throughout. Or AB last year shot a round at Texas State's where he shot 1108. He won the tournament by 1 stroke over, guess who? Gannon Buhr. The tournament consistency shown by Gannon, we don't see at this point anymore. And what differentiates this from other performances, other than obviously the utter dominance, is that I believe Gannon could do this anywhere, almost any week. I know that we say like Gannon doesn't like courses where he has to make decisions. He's winning on those courses. He is. He's won on every single type of course that we've seen. He's had an insane season so far. I don't expect it to slow down. And he's also the last player as well to even average 1080 for an elite event. And then 2 months ago, guess who it was? Gannon Buhr at the Kansas City Wide Open. He's consistently playing at such a high level. But I do think AB is the only other player that I could possibly see, but I don't think he's anywhere near as consistent as Gannon.
Yeah, certainly. Brodie, do you think there's anybody worth throwing into that company?
It's tough to say. I'm going back and just looking to see if there's anyone that like catches my eye. The one person that I had in mind, and it's simply just the reasoning kind of that Gary was giving of where the only way for this would work is if Gannon himself wasn't in contention, right? Because if Gannon is there and he's in contention, no one's going to be able to really run away from him. But what are some of the events that Gannon in the past hasn't done well at? The majors, right? That's something that we've talked about. And so the person that comes to my mind is like an Isaac Robinson, someone that now he did win. I saw a Champions Cup by 5. Worlds was a little bit closer in margin there. So it's not like he's winning double digits. But in those tournaments, if you go back and look and watch him at Worlds and watch him at Champions Cup, we all did have that feeling of no one can touch this guy this week, right? And so I think just the way he's been playing those big majors, he might be the only one, because it's got to be a tournament that Gannon historically hasn't done well at in the past. And so I would probably put it as Isaac Robinson as maybe the only one. Now, skill set base, yeah, maybe you throw an AB in there, maybe an old Eagle too. When we saw Eagle and Paul basically had the 1v1 match at the European Open. But as of right now, I think Isaac might be the only one when the pressure is at its highest, and maybe Gannon is just putting too much pressure on himself.
It's a good point. He is one of the only people we've had the feeling of this guy's unbeatable right now. You talk about other guys have skill sets, but how often do they get into that mode? Hunter, do you agree with any of these takes?
Well, I think I was doing the same thing as Brodie, because the only person I've ever had that feeling in recent memory, if you obviously go back to 2015, 2016, you bring in Paul and Ricky, but in modern era, recent memory, the only guy I felt like that about is Isaac Robinson. And when the dude was automatic, when we had that feeling across one more round, mind you, 4 rounds, he won by 5. Like what are we talking about here? Gannon just won by 11. What is the dude going to do if you give him a 4th round? Like the dude might have won by 20 for all we know. Who the heck knows? I think if we're just talking skill set wise, obviously, yes, there are players that are capable of shooting 1088 rating, whatever you want to, however you want to call this golf. There's people that are capable of shooting that, but I just don't think there's anyone currently on tour capable of doing that across 3 rounds. I have a hard time believing that, because you think of a player like Anthony Barella, you think of a player like Simon Lizotte might be able to, when he gets really hot and his putter's going, Ricky Wysocki, Paul McBeth, but I don't see them doing it across 3 or 4 rounds. You know what I mean? I think that's the hardest part. So no. I think the only way someone's running away from an event like this is if Gannon's not there. And even then, I honestly don't know if it's going to happen. I think it might take more than that, just because the level of consistency across those rounds, like back to Isaac Robinson, that the most consistent golf I've watched is when he won both the time he won Worlds and WR Jackson Champions Cup. And the dude still won by less than 7 strokes, less than 6 strokes. Like he still was a narrow margin of victory in what felt like robotic, and we just watched Gannon do it by 11 across less golf.
It's true. It's funny to think like if Isaac could flip that switch in a non-major, because I think sometimes majors just have a way of staying close because there's a lot of nerves. It gets, even though he looks unbeatable, there's still little slip-ups. But I think it's a perfect storm of like this event being pretty easy course, slightly weaker field, and just an event that, like, you know, these pro tours for Gannon, you know, he's just kind of collecting them at this point. And so it's very easy for him, I think, to just get into cruise control. And he's almost playing against himself at some point, just like, hey, how low can I shoot? Because he just has that belief that he knows he's going to do well.
You know who was on the dance floor for that other time that we felt there was a dominant performance? Silas Schultz. So Silas is always going to be around whenever there's a dominant performance.
It's true. It's true.
I will say, I mean, Paul this year had the flash of it at Champions Cup where it felt like, oh, this is it. Paul's about to run away with this thing. And he didn't. Like, that's the hard part is everyone else that you get that feeling, something happens, right? Where it's like, oh,
it's so hard to do that for multiple rounds.
There's their bad round, or they had a bad first round and they've clawed their way back into it. It's just to do it from start to finish. I just don't think there's anyone else out there right now.
Almost got numb to the way Gannon plays, where it's like, yeah, nobody's doing that over.
I think there is one player that could do it. The problem is she's an FPO, and it's Kristen.
Yeah.
So
I don't even
doesn't really
know
help.
if I believe that, to be honest. Well, I believe she can win by 20. I just don't know that it's going to.
She could win by 20. It's not going to look the same as what Gannon just did. But
yeah, for sure. All right, I'm going to move on to our last topic here before the finals. This one, I like to tie in anytime we get some interesting golf topics because our sports are somewhat adjacent. So if you were watching, we had the U.S. Open this past weekend, a very interesting U.S. Open on arguably the hardest golf course ever displayed on tour. It was a combination of an insane setup with some insane weather that made Oakmont absolutely a disaster out there. So here's what I want to know. The golf world pushed the boundaries of course difficulty this past weekend at U.S. Open with only one player managing to finish under par, and it really got to the very last putt to do so. Should disc golf hold more events that push these boundaries? Is it realistic to even get the best players near even par? What would that look like? And would it even be fun to watch? Is that something we even want to have, Moses?
Yeah, I think I'm going to look at this from a more holistic tour approach. Disc golf is a very young sport. When we talk about golf, we talk about prestige, we talk about excellence, we talk about these tournaments that have a lot of history to them. The Pro Tour has existed for 10 years, whereas these golf events have existed for 10 times the amount of time, if not longer. You know, continuing to have different types of tournaments in disc golf, I think, is one of the unique things about it. For example, Northwoods Black, I mean, that is considered probably the hardest course on tour, you know, and for somebody to win in 4 rounds at 15 down, that's pretty equivalent, I feel like, in disc golf to shooting like -1 in golf, honestly. I mean, as easy as disc golf is. People love the preserve, for example. I mean, Gannon just won shooting 14 down per round. I think having different types of tournaments where there's going to be different types of scoring, you know, we've always had shreddable courses on tour, but at the end of the day, I think the back end of the field is kind of catching up a little bit to where there isn't as much teeth for any amount of the field, let alone, you know, just the lower end of the field. But yeah, having different types of disparity per event, I think fans enjoy seeing the players shred. I think fans enjoy seeing players struggle. But for a course to average even par, I mean, would that be fun for the players? Would we enjoy seeing that sort of thing? I mean, Northwoods Black was an absolute slugfest over 4 rounds. By the end of it, yeah, we enjoyed watching it. But is that something that we're really wanting to see? I mean, at OB at that course, even more so, you're going to have people shooting, you know, even par or anything like that. But I just don't really know if that's exactly what we're looking for.
Okay, Brodie, what do you think? Would it make for good golf, and is it even doable?
So it is doable, but I don't know if it's doable in the short term because you do need a lot of land, and the way that courses are currently set up, you would have to change a whole lot about them for it to go that way. What was the other question? Is would we like it type of thing?
Yeah, would it be entertaining?
I think it would give, because here's the thing. I think when people think about players shooting close to par, what they think about is just tons of OB, and they think about tons of artificial OB, and they just hate the way that feels or looks. So there's a couple things you can do to basically make it more challenging without the OB. I still think there needs to be OB. I think there needs to be forced carries. There needs to be something to where if you throw a shot 150 feet short of where you're trying to throw it, it doesn't skip off the ground and give you a circle 2 putt. it catches tall grass and you're in a hazard. Or, that's the thing with disc golf is there's a lot of bad shots that end up good. I mean, I think there was one shot this past week. I remember Gannon basically throwing it out of his hand and immediately being like, oh my God, that was so terrible. And it hit the pole on the basket. And it's because overstable disc correct bad shots. If you pull an overstable disc and there's nothing for it to hit, it's going to end up being a good shot. So I'm not going to talk about disc technology because I think that would be an exciting way of saying get rid of overstable disc, make people have to actually throw good shots. But L-shaped holes, make it to where if you don't get around the corner, you're screwed. One of the reasons why Northwood Black is so challenging is some of the holes on there where players are getting 10s, 11s. They don't know how to play holes where they're actually L-shaped. The other thing, longer shots. We can't be having par 3s or par 4s where if you throw one decent shot, you're going to get a birdie, and then obviously smaller chains in the baskets.
All right, Hunter, what do you think about the U.S. Open model, how that would apply to disc golf?
Well, I think the tough thing we're dealing with here is when you're looking at how they make a course in golf harder is the rough got way longer. The greens were incredibly difficult. And it's a lot of times the short game almost that get the fairways might get narrower and whatever. But a lot of times it's like the greens are crazy fast. You were showing me like there's not that back shelf to stop stuff, yada, yada, yada. In disc golf, putting is putting. You can't make putting harder without changing the baskets, which if we're not talking about that, the hard part here is you would have to make the driving and the second shot way harder. So, the only way I really thought of that could accomplish both, because if you just make the woods way tighter where it's almost like you're thrown into a bamboo jungle, now we're just watching pitch outs and players hitting a tree right in front of them. No one wants to see that. If you just make artificial OB everywhere, again, it gets confusing for the viewer. No one wants to see that. The only thing I think could still be enjoyable to watch that would fit this is bringing back stroke and distance. So making forced carries, bringing in tighter OB, where if I throw, it doesn't matter how far up I progressed. My only example for this that is entertaining to watch is the bunker rule is the closest thing we've had in recent history. And watching AB throw the tournament away was electric, and it made it way harder. So if there was more of that going on, where you're way far back in the fairway, you throw a good shot, it skips OB, you have to re-execute that shot, and you're getting an OB stroke, that could greatly increase the amount of strokes we're seeing. And I think it could get players closer to par, make a lot more decision making, because now maybe you have to play safe because you're worried I can't throw this 500-foot shot twice. That's the only thing I could think of. But realistically, it's a different sport, right? Like golf, you go out and your average player is shooting way over par. So it's still mesmerizing to watch a player shoot even par on a really hard course. In disc golf, your average guys are going out there and shredding their local courses. So I don't think it would translate very well if the player's winning a tournament at +2 or 1 under in disc golf. I don't think it would work well. It's a different sport.
Sure. Gary, do you see any way to make this happen, or is it just, like Hunter said, a different sport, not really feasible?
It's a little of this and that. I think what it looks like, it was relatively easy to answer because it kind of looks like the 2024 Champions Cup, which Moses mentioned. In a field of nearly 100 players across 4 rounds, only 6 times was a score better than 5 under par even carded across the entire event. The winner only shot 15 under across the 4 rounds. That's 3.8 strokes under par per round, and only 4 people finished double digits under par. And that was fun to watch. I really, really enjoyed that, especially as someone who's played the course. It was super fun to watch. And it also kind of looks like the Cascade Challenge earlier this year, which, was difficult because it was kind of a newer layout and everything like that. But only 10 players finished better than double digits at that course too. But what do both those have in common? They're tough wooded courses. Is it definitely possible to get players closer to par? Sure, like some of the things have been brought up. But the real question is, should we be caring about getting players closer to par? And I think the answer to that is a resounding no, at least not all the time. I think part of what's important is diversity on the tour. Tough wooded courses, some bomber courses, some park style courses. All of these are fun to watch, especially because it challenges a wide array of skill sets of being able to play consistently, deal with difficulty, make decisions. What we should be caring about instead, and that's getting more eyes on the sport by designing courses that allow for that, and making courses that challenge touring pros appropriately by having layouts that make sense for the FPO, layouts that make sense for the MPO. If we make courses harder and the skills develop around them to come to the challenges, great. But we're too beholden to historic courses, and I think that we need to innovate and create diversity and meaningful challenges. And if we do those things, the problem kind of presented by this question is going to solve itself. But we do have to be careful, because no matter how we like to design our course, the Pro Tour will just come in and add its own OB anyway.
It's true. Yeah, when I was thinking about this, and I was thinking of ways to like, okay, how do we like simulate this idea of it's so hard to be under par, and it's because like the US Open, yeah, they're different sports, but like you can see it in these guys' eyes. They're playing a brand of golf they're not used to, and it drives them nuts. I mean, Wyndham Clark went in and blew up the locker room in Oakmont because he was like, these guys are in disbelief. So I think it's almost supposed to look unnatural. And one thing I thought with disc golf is like, yeah, I agree. Stroke and distance works, pace of play nightmare though, and there are other solutions that maybe are tough to visualize. Maybe the way you do it is you just make the courses super, super narrow and you play it all as hazard. So that way you're still advancing your disc, but you're just collecting a ton of strokes on the way if you're not throwing the most precise shot. So you got a picture really small greens, and anywhere you land out of there is just hazard. So that way pace of play is the same, but you're still adding a ton of strokes and getting punished if you make the smallest mistake, because that's what the US Open in golf is all about. You make the tiniest mistake, that ball hops from the first cut into the rough, and all of a sudden you're taking an entire extra stroke because you have to hack it out of there.
I will say one thing that disc golf is kind of missing though, because we do get this on some holes at some courses, right? It's very rare, but we do get it. And everyone talks about it. All the players know about it. Everyone knows how important it is. And my whole thought process is, why not just have more holes like that throughout the entire course?
Sure.
There is a massive difference in the mental side of golf. Like that's what golf people say all the time, it's way more mental than physical. And I think that's something that's missing in disc golf. When you go out there and Gannon is thinking, am I going to shoot 14, 15, 16, or 17 under today? That is completely different than saying, am I going to shoot under par or over par? The idea that you can actually live on that par line, or that you're getting bogeys or doubles or triples throughout your round and having to bounce back, that is a way different thing than having to deal with 3 pars in a row. And to me, not challenging that side, I think that's a miss. I like tournaments like the Preserve, where it's a freaking birdie or die course. You got to get off running. You'll know after 9 holes whether you have a chance of winning or not, because if you're not 7 under, you're probably not going to win. But that's a different test. I would also love the thing of where someone goes out and they just grinds and they shoot 4 over par the first round, but they say, hey, if I play 3 good rounds, I can still get back in it. And you can't do that at the Preserve. You can do that on a harder test.
Certainly.
Do you think? Yeah. You think the Pro Tour is trying to do this on its own? I took notice of this for the first time at the Northwest Disc Golf Championship, and then I saw it again here. And I'm going to go back and look at other events. If you look at the course maps for the events last year to this year, all of the OB lines and fairways are being narrowed. Like they are bringing in OB lines on both sides in places where it was only on one or not at all. So I wonder, are they trying to make this happen using artificial OB? And then at what point do you they're making decisions upon the courses like that are outside the expectations of the people who design the courses? I think the Pro Tour does kind of have the agenda in mind to make the courses tougher. And I think that the easiest way, the Pro Tour likes to do subtle changes. And I think the most subtle way to change it is you get the caddy book and you don't see new OB. It just got a little tighter, like almost to the point where like, did that get narrower? Like, is that even smaller than it was before? I think if you do that, you just say, hey, let's bring it in 5 feet this year. It's a little more subtle and it makes the course harder. So that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I don't hate it. But again, with disc golf, I just think to really make disc golf more challenging, it has to be the shot shaping that is required off the tee and not just the OB. And that's why we got to start making more holes that are L-shaped. You got to start getting it to where if you're not landing in the proper zone, you really are putting yourself at a huge disadvantage. And you can do this in an open course too. It's very easy to do in an open course. You can literally create like a Mando. And again, I know this is going crazy, but USDGC, they put Christmas trees out there. Yeah. But you can create a situation of where we can create these shot shapes having to be formed versus in disc golf when we're allowing, I mean, we saw it this past weekend, obviously Gannon went berserk, but when you're allowing open space and players to throw their most comfortable shot wherever they end up, they're going to shoot really, really well. And I would love to see some courses push the envelope a little bit and say, hey, if you throw a bad shot, you have to play smart and have to play for par. Like there's you messed up. There's no chance of making a birdie versus courses like Preserve. You throw a bad shot, you just have to throw a really good second shot and you can get a birdie still.
I think a great example of this, which obviously most people haven't played yet, is hole 8 at the new London redesign. It's on old hole 11, but basically if they made it where you have to basically, the landing zone is a little past where the old basket was, and they made the fairway wider. But if you don't get down there, you're not birdieing. Because if you get down there,
it's an
you
L
still,
shape.
it is L shape, right? If you
That's
get down
really the
there,
only way.
you still have like 350 feet in, maybe more. But the only way you have any angle of attacking it is if you got down there on your tee shot.
There's a couple par 5s that are similar on that course too.
Hole
That cut in
9,
like that.
the next hole honestly is like that too, where it's like it's a bomb wide open shot, but if you don't get far enough, you can't attack on your second shot. And it is true of like that. That's a great way. We've played it several times, and it's like if we're farther back, you can't advance. You just have to get to the landing zone in order to see it.
I love Idlewater. I'm going to be playing there in a few weeks, but that is a course that is a lot like a lot of courses where if you throw a bad tee shot, your second shot is simply, how do I throw this as far as possible to get it as far down the fairway as possible? And people are just chucking rollers. And in my opinion, that is not skill based. That has now become luck based. Does it hit a rock? Does it hit a root? Does it hit a tree? Versus the other thing of where we're now saying this is the landing zone. You have to get to this landing zone, not just left and right, but also distance wise, because when you look at the Preserve, a lot of those holes, it doesn't matter if you land 500 feet, 450 feet, or 400 feet. You're going to be able to birdie from all of those. And you got to do both. You got to do both if you really want to test these people's skills.
Yeah, certainly. You can see it. I mean, as a dirty casual, I've played a number of Pro Tour courses, and I've never seen that more realistic than when I went to Northwood Black, where there was a moment where you'd walk up to a corner on a fairway and be like, man, if I don't get here, which I can't, I don't know how I would ever get around this and get, it gives you so much respect for the skill required there. Whereas like I've played Eureka Temp, I've played a number of other like Pro Tour level courses where you're right, Brodie, if you don't have a great shot, just chuck it as far as you can. If your shot's not that great off of 14 at Eureka Temp, go real big hyzer over the water, and you can kind of make it up for itself. So there's a lot to be said about making landing zones a bigger thing.
Oh, certainly. All right, let's jump into our final topic here. Gary Moses. Moses, I think you're our most recent champ between the two of you, because I think you've won pretty recently. I'm going to just say that.
I think I won last week.
Okay,
yeah,
I knew it was recent. That's really recent.
Very recent.
Well, in that case, would you like to go first or second?
I got to be honest, Gary, take it away.
Oh,
He's playing the setup. I like it. All right. Well, here's our prompt here. We got a little group discussion here. Which of these groups of players finishes the season with more wins? Got Group 1 featuring Calvin Heimberg, Paul McBeth, and Ricky Wysocki, and Group 2 featuring Kyle Klein, Simon Lizotte, and Ezra Robinson. Obviously, already a win in that group. Gary, what do you think?
I think this would have been a really interesting question in previous seasons, but like you said, Ezra already has a win, so Group B has a lead, and I don't know if anyone in these two groups are going to get another win this season. I'll be straight up, like the raw talent is there, and all 6 of them technically have the skills necessary to win in the modern field, but I guess we'll break it down. Group A, Calvin feels like he's continuing to settle into a meme that he's created for himself, which is always on the podium from the 4th card. And I don't know, he just can't put it together for 3 or 4 rounds, and it feels like his putt's off. Paul's great, but he 100% can win. I don't think he's going to win this season. I want him to, but I don't think he's going to. I really, really don't. And Ricky gives me the most hope of anyone in Group A of getting a win, but he's still kind of adjusting to his new sponsorship, I think. His historic Texas stretch was non-existent this year. And he wasn't a factor this weekend at arguably his most dominant tournament ever. I think he could squeak out a win, but I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't. Looking at Group B, Ezra already has a win this season, but he has not looked really great since then, only having one other top 5 performance. And he's not really showing me signs of winning again this year, but, I'm a big supporter Foundation. I hope he does. Simon is Simon, right? It's hard to quantify chaos, which is basically where Simon exists on a weekly basis. When he plays at his best, he's probably the deadliest guy in this group of 6 players. But I'm not so certain he picks up a win this year, or he could just rattle off 3. We don't know. The man who tips the argument for me is Kyle Klein, because he's been super close a couple of times this season, with second place at the Open at Austin, second place at the Northwest Disc Golf Championship. And I think if he can just put things together, he is most likely the person in these groups to get that win before the year is over, outside of Ezra's win that he obviously already has. So that being said, combining Ezra already being up 1 for Group B and Klein being the most likely to win, answer's going to be Group B.
Okay. Definitely a safe play there. Obviously, Group 1 built off of maybe some old notions. Moses, are you convinced otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I think either argument could be made, and honestly, that's why I let Gary go first, because I was going to disagree with him no matter what, and I was always kind of leaning Group 1, to be fair, but I was always going to disagree. I don't think either of these groups of players are going to get that many wins this season. You have 6 players in the top 12 here, and they have 1 win overall, which is crazy to me. I mean, these players are at the top of their games, but I just genuinely don't think that we're going to see, Paul or Rick or Calvin or any of the other players like rattle off like 3 or 4 wins. I don't think that's going to happen. For Group 2, Kyle, Simon, and Ezra, I think Simon is what we expect him to be. I mean, some tournaments he's pretty consistently, in like 15th place, whereas some tournaments he finishes in 2nd. And I think for him, what the bad thing is his incredibly slow tournament starts. But I think that is not probably going to change that much this year. I also am kind of interested overall, like his vlogs. Obviously, that's a huge part of his season. Is that affecting his performance? Like, because I genuinely think that as an athlete, that has to be something that's affecting you. But he's been on camera so much, I don't really know. But Ezra started the season off incredibly, obviously picking up that win, but he only has 1 finish in the top 10 in his last 4 events, which I would expect more from him and for somebody that we were thinking was going to be a top 5 player in the world. I think maybe slightly lost that edge moving to a new manufacturer, already picking up that win. And then Kyle, I think Kyle's Mr. Forgotten. I think he's the best out of these 3 players. I think if he's going to pick up a win this year, or if anyone in the group is, he's going to be the one to do it. And he's always a threat later in the year at like USDGC and Worlds as well. For the first group, I think it's just a matter of time. I think they're going to have to pick up wins at some point. Paul and Rick have multiple top 3 finishes and have been so close. I mean, Rick at the LA Open probably should have won that tournament. Paul at Champions Cup just plays a decent 2nd and 3rd round. He's probably going to, win that tournament after like a 14 down the first one. Calvin doesn't really move me. Got to be honest with you. He doesn't have the same motion that he has in years past, in my opinion. He's finished in 5th a few times, but I just don't feel like he's as inevitable as a player as he once was. So yeah, I think Group 1 probably, but I don't expect many wins inside these 6 players this year.
Wow, surprising! Not really just a lot of belief in that group in general, because you mentioned. I mean, these are all top 12 players. This is like really supposed to be the best of the best. I mean, besides the guys that are getting the wins this year.
Definitely at the top of their game in Group A.
Yeah. No, I'm surprised. I do think between these 2 groups, I think it is very close. I do have a little more belief, like, if Gary, your argument is like maybe Group 2 ends up with 2 wins and maybe Group 1 or 0. Like, I don't know. I feel like I could see more. I kind of agree with Moses. Maybe it's a matter of time, especially for Rick. Like, I think I'd really be surprised if we get to the end of the season and he hasn't scraped up 2, and maybe one of those just comes in like the championship finale or whatever. Like, maybe one of them isn't a Pro Tour win, but I don't know. It's crazy to think that whole group, and it's just all the wins are getting poached by certain players. But Gary, congratulations. You're a winner today. Well done. Any final thoughts?
A couple weeks ago or last week or something like that, Trevor was like, I haven't spoken to Gary in months. I have the receipts to prove that's not the case. I don't know why he's trying to destroy our friendship. I thought we had something there, Trevor, as buddies, but all right, I see how it is.
Whenever people start going over to Tour Life, I get a little, like, the claws come out a little bit. I start getting scared and defensive.
Yeah, but you got to remember, Trevor, is that
I lash out.
I would never have had an opportunity like that if you didn't give me an opportunity.
Well, you're right. That's why it hurts all the more.
I'm
be
a first love,
people to the top, man. They're just stepping on me on their way to Tour Life.
Can I post something out there?
What, another? You're gonna ask Moses to
from
join
you
Tour
or
Life?
your 1,000 people live chat?
So we have the main event. right? Connor versus Kelsey Ace Challenge. That's the main event. But we
That is a main event.
We need
July
something.
11th.
We need something to be like leading in. You don't just start with the main event. You
Sure.
need
Oh, we need a
something
co-main.
before. Silva versus Hunter distance contest.
If we can get Silva,
There we go.
We
Man.
just have to figure out a way.
Silva
get
versus
Silva
Hunter
to win.
distance
She will be in
contest.
Europe.
Yeah.
But-
Should we just
She can be
Virtual,
this Mania
virtual.
challenge.
virtual distance comp.
We'll just get around the field live.
virtual distance comp would be electric? I'm not gonna lie.
It's distance competition.
We might have to make that happen in some capacity.
Just have her chucks a frisbee out in the field. Be like, all right, how far that goes, Silva?
that could be a good time.
We might
If
have to
we
do
get
it.
her to submit, just like here's my max distance,
and we just
you
don't show you until after
she
you
throws
throw.
it. I'll take 5 shots against it. I trust. I think I can do it.
It could be a good
See,
time.
so my
she
bet
can-
was
she can just
1v1.
submit.
My bet
I'm
was
saying-
one shot.
But I'm saying
Yeah.
she gets as many shots as she wants. She submits. This is my farthest shot, and I have 5 shots to beat it. I don't know what the distance is.
Does she
Let's
crack
do-
5? Do you think?
Let's do 3. Let's do
think so.
3. Let's do 3 shots. I
Okay.
don't like my chances with 5. 3, I like my chances.
Driver.
I think I
mid,
gotta throw
putter.
425 and I win. That's what I think.
Maybe. I don't know. Comment down below who'd
One
win.
way to
Do
find
we need
out.
do we need to make it happen? Silva, if you're watching, we've issued a challenge.
We gotta get this to happen with Silva versus Hunter. We
Um,
gotta get this.
if
to
you wanna
Moses,
submit it-
we'll be commentators, Moses.
There you go.
If you want to
I mean,
submit any
she's throwing
topics for
like
the next,
standstill backhands like 280.
Yeah.
she can rip. I've seen
I
her
can
throw
throw- but
400 feet.
I can throw a standstill backhand probably 320 to 350.
It's true.
I know, but I'm saying she's not short.
I never said she doesn't throw far in the grand scheme of disc golf. Just
I
compare
think you
for
might have literally
FBO, she
said
doesn't
that.
throw
I
far.
think you might have said
I
that
think you said that
literally
exact
today.
quote, Hunt.
She doesn't throw in the grand.
I think
Like
you
if
have,
you, if
I
you
think
put
you have
her
2
against
quotes
the
today.
8,
I think
like
you have 2
average,
quotes.
the average PDGA player is like in the 800 rateds. I'm pretty sure, maybe low 900. She probably throws farther than the average PDGA member.
Oh, I'd say so.
Was it like 860? I think
That's
last
what I'm
time.
saying.
they-
Like she throws far in the grand scheme of disc golf. She's just not a far top FPO thrower.
She's not in the 1% of FPO.
She's
No.
probably in the 1% of the grand scheme of
There's
FPO.
only
I'm in the top
12
1% of
top
distance
FPO
throwers.
players.
But I don't throw that far in the grand scheme of disc of like
There's another
MPO
quote.
players.
Top 1%.
I bet I'm in the top 1% of disc golf distance throwers. I would bet all
we
of us
can
on this
make the
podcast
quote say
are.
whatever we want.
If you had everyone who plays disc golf chuck a disc as far as they can, I bet I'm in the top 1%.
We'll never know.
We're getting some
never know.
killer quotes from this episode. Hunter
Yeah.
can
There's some
beat
good
Silva
quotes.
in a distance competition. Top 1%.
I don't think that's a crazy take. I think this podcast is going to end and
I
Brodie's
don't
going to be
know,
like,
but
"You're
yeah.
a smoker." Of course.
Listen, if you want to submit a topic for the next week's episode or just weigh in on the Hunter v Silva distance competition, scan the QR code on the screen. Let us know, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.